wait till they've finished, because otherwise the horses are going to look at that and be like, I don't like that. Melanie.
What's his name?
Biggie. Yeah. Biggie Smalls.
How long have you been riding?
Oh gosh, oh my. 44 years. Long time. I know, Bear. So I'll tell you a little bit about the horses while we're waiting. So Biggie here, he was from a rescue facility. He was taken from people that weren't looking after him. Bear used to belong to the Amish up in, I think it was Pennsylvania, and he wasn't looked after at all. He had terrible, it still does, PTSD from that, because the Amish don't look after their horses very well. Nick was, he's a retired hunt horse. So he used to apparently be a total tank. Would go for hours. Little Henry, he is actually the same breed as Nick. So Nick is a part Percheron, which is a French draft horse, and then he's mixed with a thoroughbred. And then little Henry, he used to be a riding school pony, and he's part Percheron, part Welsh Cob, which is a very small pony from Wales in the UK. And then Louis, he was a riding school pony as well. So all of our horses come to us because they've retired from their normal job. And this is just a nice, slow, easy-going life for them.
Good job, Mr. Nicky. Good job,
Good
Mr.
job, everybody.
I hope you ain't afraid of cats, Nick.
Yeah, we have two barn cats here. That one is Bagheera, and he's all black, and he's like a mini leopard from Jungle Book.
Welcome to Middleton Place Equestrian Centre. This is part of historical Middleton Place, where we're going to be headed on the trail today. And we are home to history on horseback. This centre was built in 1971. We are home to 55 horses here. 21 of them are part of our trail team. The rest of the horses are privately owned and boarded here. So the boarded horses, they live in the two barns we just passed on the left of us during the day, and then all of the horses get turned out for the night here. So we are lucky enough to be able, with the weather, to offer trail rides year-round here, except for Thanksgiving and Christmas Day, and then we do try to avoid all of the really bad weather that everybody else does as well. But we'll go out in the rain, as long as there's no thunder.
Hello. Big poop. Watch that poop, Nick.
Warming up nicely.
Go ahead. Dropping it out there.
Dog or cat though?
Oh, yeah. Huh?
Dog or cat?
What? No. You just did the same. They know very well where they're stepping.
Do you rotate which one's through the trail?
Yes, yes. We of course we base the guests on either weight or age. What time is it? And then the horses only go out twice a day, if at all. Especially right now, some of them will get several days off. But we only ever use them 3 days in a row. So if they go out 2, 2, 2, they then get a couple of days.
We're going to head down this trail to the southern end of Middleton Place, so you'll be able to see part of the gardens and some of the buildings. Middleton Place was named in 1741 when Henry Middleton married 20-year-old Mary Williams. She was the only surviving child of John Williams, and he died that year. Now, he had built up this property from 1706 when he bought the land. There was a large 3-story house that he built and 500 acres, and all of this became Mary's. Now, when Henry arrived here, he straight away started developing and building onto the property. The first building he put up was the spring house. Now, this is a cold storage building. It sits on top of a natural spring, and that cold water running through the building keeps the inside during the summer at an average of 55 degrees, which is cold enough to keep all of the farm produce fresh. The second story of the spring house was not added until 1851 by Williams Middleton, and it is a chapel. This chapel was used by everybody who lived and worked here. Sunday mornings was where they gave the slave children their Sunday school lessons. This was highly unusual for the 1850s, especially as we're in the South. Henry and Mary were very social people, so they had a lot of guests that came through Middleton. And they were getting a very large family themselves. So by 1755, 14 years after Henry arrived here, they were building again. This time they added the north and south flankers. These were 2 identical bookend buildings to the main house. So the north flanker is where they had a guest area, plus a library with a huge collection of over 10,000 books. There was also art and music rooms and a very small ballroom in there. The south flanker was more for running the business. Downstairs there was all offices, and then upstairs was a single gentleman's guest area. So Henry and Mary, they ended up with 12 children. Unfortunately, only 7 did survive through to adulthood. They did lose several as infants, and then there was just so many nasty diseases and illnesses back then with no medication. But the men in the Middleton family, for many of the generations, were extremely politically influential, not only for the state, but also for America. Henry Middleton was governor here. He was also the second president for the First Continental Congress. His son Arthur signed the Declaration of Independence, and his son, the second Henry, was the first ever appointed ambassador to Russia. And that's just the first 3 generations. Many more men in the coming generations were just as important. Henry's family had been in the Low Country since the late 1600s, and they had built their wealth on the island of Barbados. There they had become very successful sugarcane plantation farmers. They had also got involved with rum and molasses. So when they arrived in the Low Country, though, they found it's not hot enough for long enough to grow sugarcane, and it's too wet to grow tobacco, cotton, and corn. The Middleton family were breeding and selling cattle, and they were also clearing land and selling the lumber.
And they
By
started
the
selling
late
rice.
1740s, Henry was searching for bigger ways to make money. He was finally introduced to rice in the 1750s. Now, rice was not a brand new crop in America, but it was to the Low Country. So this rice was called Carolina Gold, mainly because it has a gold-colored husk, but at one time it was almost as valuable as gold. So Henry became very wealthy growing Carolina Gold rice. Alright, so coming around this bend, you'll look over to the left-hand side. That first building is the Spring House. Sitting on the hilltop to the left is the South Flanker.
Hey,
Middleton Place at
this is where we came
65
by on the
acres
boat that
is
day.
the largest and oldest formal gardens in the United States. The majority of these were designed by the same Frenchmen who had designed the gardens at the Palace of Versailles. But everything you can see was created by hand, and that meant digging out all of these ponds as well. So at the bottom of the hill, we have the mill pond. That is followed by the butterfly lakes. And then the last pond you can see is Henry's demonstration rice field. He was the first rice grower in the region, so he wanted a field to show all of his guests and family, but he also needed investors, so having it so close to the house was a little bit easier for him to show it off. The last body of water is the Ashley River. This from here is 15 miles by boat down to Charleston. And there's one more building to look for, and that's the mill. So that's tucked into the corner down here on the left. This was also built in 1851, same time as the chapel. The mill was primarily used for grinding up flax seed and also corn. And the only reason they were able to grow these two crops here is because of the level of ground. Most of the low country is at almost sea level. So here, at the South Flanker level, it is 38 feet. So they were able to grow, the flax and corn. And then the rice finally was figured out that they could grind that up about 20 or so years later.
Thanks, Nick. Not running me into the tree there, buddy.
Coming up round a couple of bends, we're going to go down a hill, followed by an uphill. Now, the horses have done this hill many times, so you don't need to tell them which way to go. But to keep you and your horse balanced going down the hill, all you do is push your heels really far to the ground and then lean backwards over your saddle. At the bottom, you sit up. Going uphill, you just lean forward. So I'm going to stop here and let Blooming catch up.
Good job, Nick. Good job. Good job. Good job, Mr. Nicky. Good job, Nick. All right. Good job, Mr. Nick. Good job. Good job, Mickey.
They do. It's easier for them to go a little bit quicker coming after the
Mm-hmm. Nick is a well-mannered boy.
Of all of the landowners that were in South Carolina, Henry became the biggest. He owned close to 40,000 acres of land. This ended up being 19 rice plantations, all in the States, except for 2 in Georgia and 2 in Florida, and they were all placed near fresh bodies of water. So here we have about 6,500 acres. The majority of it is across the road, where there are about a dozen old, very overgrown rice fields, and then we have 2 large rice fields on this side. So Middleton actually never was supposed to grow rice. This was his last plantation, but he had a lot of people that he needed to feed. So all of the rice that they grew here, they kept, and it was for feeding the slaves and the Middleton family and their guests. The Civil War started in 1861, and when it started, the family chose to leave the property. They packed up just a few things, and they took their closest slaves and they headed to Darlington, South Carolina. Most people thought the war would be over within a couple of months, so that's why they didn't take much with them. Unfortunately, the Union Army had a lot of soldiers still moving across the South, and there were Union soldiers traveling from New York to Charleston, and the route they took came straight past Middleton. So finding it abandoned, they stopped here. Unfortunately, during that time, they did a huge amount of damage. They ate most of the livestock. They did destroy quite large parts of the garden, and they also damaged the statues. When the troops left after 6 months, and they left in February 1865, they set fire to everything. This was a common thread with the Union soldiers, as they all tried to destroy everything that had created the wealth down here. So the main house and the north flanker, they both burned to the ground, leaving just the outside wall, and the south flanker's roof ended up collapsing. Once the family returned about a year later, they did rebuild the roof onto the south flanker, and then 2 years later, they added an addition at the southern end. And the family lived on the property in the south flanker all the way through until 1969. It was at this time that the present descendant inherited Middleton, and he set it back in time. So if you visit, it's the museum, and it looks like it did during the early 1800s. Right, so coming out of the woods, to the left of us is the entrance to the Middleton Inn. So this little building that you can see is for guests to check in. It's also where they have their offices and a little tiny weeny gift shop. The inn itself is 3 buildings, and they sit on the banks of the Ashley River. So the architect that designed these in the late 1980s designed the 3 buildings to represent the main house and the 2 flanking buildings.
Yes, yeah.
We love skiing out here.
So these buildings are a very contemporary design. They have a flat roof, lots of angles. There are 55 rooms. They all face the river. And every single room is floor to ceiling, wall to wall windows. So you get absolutely amazing views if you stay here.
Gas tank. Yes.
Isn't it lovely?
Thanks, Dad.
Thinking he'd be on the boat freezing.
Yeah. Mm.
Got Nick.
Yeah. Picnic. Nick, you're doing a heck of a job here, bud. I tell you. Feel like you're showing me what to do, Nick. It's kind of soft down there. Be careful, bud. It's a beautiful trail.
The reason that we don't have the remains of the main house and the north flanker today is because of the great earthquake of Charleston on August 31st, 1886. So this huge earthquake, it was about 7 on the Richter scale, was generated from the Middleton-Somerville fault line, which we are presently on at the moment. So this earthquake zone is the second most active in America. Now, the great earthquake brought down not only the main house and the north flanker, it also... Pull that right rein out, Lu-Ming. There you go. It's doing a detour. So the earthquake did cause over $160 million in damage, and it was felt as far north as Boston. But it only killed 60 people. Now, from the remains of the main house and the north flanker, the Middletons commissioned new farm buildings. Bricks were very expensive back then. They were all still handmade. So this way they could construct new buildings and also not look at the eyesore of 2 giant piles of rubble.
Yes, so. Big drop.
Up to the left of us, there's this pond, and in the pond there is a fallen down tree. There is a beautiful great blue heron sat on the lower branch.
Beautiful. Blue heron. Good job, Nick.
End of this trail, we're going to turn right, and we will be between the Ashley River and the South Rice Field. So this was the largest rice field on the property. It's roughly 100 acres, but quite a lot of it now is covered by marsh grasses and water plants. The water in the river has got too salty now to grow rice in this area. So the Ashley River is a tidal river, and it has a very big tide. It will raise and fall anywhere from 5 to 8 feet every single day. So this river feeds the rice field. So when the tide is up, the rice field will only get to 3 feet deep, even in the middle. And then when the tide goes out, the water will go down to about 8 inches deep. But we do have a lot of wildlife in here. There's a lot of fish, so we have a lot of birds and alligators and snakes.
That's out of the fish, this little area. Alligator right here on the grasses. If you look over the edge, you can see the squished down grasses, and the alligator is sitting on the top. I've been looking for him. I haven't seen his road.
Look down on the squash.
There's the alligator.
Okay, so there's another one right here as well to my right. He's sort of half in the water, half on the grasses.
Another one here, girls.
A little 6-footer. Big gator.
No, I've actually had them right next to us. Yeah.
There's a bird coming right, he has a big white body with a black head. This bird is a woodstock. So these are actually on the threatened list of birds. So we're really lucky. We've actually got 3 in here. But they're also America's largest stork. All of the crops that were grown in the south, rice was the most difficult and also the most dangerous. It required a lot of skill and knowledge to grow the rice, and all of the slaves that were here didn't have that. Slave traders went to Western Africa, especially Sierra Leone and Gambia, as they had all been growing rice for hundreds of years. All of the Africans were taken by force, put onto big ships, and brought here against their will. Now, most land had to be cleared and got ready for rice planting. So each man cleared 1 acre and then lowered the entire level by 3 feet. This whole area used to be a mix of marsh grasses and woodlands, and this would have all been done by hand. Women were in charge of planting and harvesting, and they had half an acre each. So this was done in March and August. When rice was ready for export, it was put into big wooden barrels and sailed down to Charleston Harbor on big ships. Alligator here near those birds. Children as young as 8 worked in the rice fields. Their first job was to scare away the birds from eating the planted rice. And then later on, once the rice was growing and these fields were flooded, they were back in to scare away the alligators, the water moccasins, and also the rats that lived here. So these jobs really were terrible, and there was no easy job in the rice fields. On average, each year they would lose somewhere between 5 and 10% of the workforce to diseases, especially malaria and yellow fever. That was carried by the mosquitoes here. But they would also get terrible foot injuries from being in this mud with bare feet. And then, of course, you've got the wildlife and the weather. There's a big alligator. Actually, there's 2 over there, 3 over there. Goodness. All on the squashed down grasses across the water.
3. There's 1 and then there's 2.
Big boy, why is it even out? I guess full of rib. They usually hibernate during the winter.
The typical day for a slave in most plantations was sun up to sundown with 1 day off a month. Henry Middleton did a very different day here. His was a task or chore list day. Everybody still started at sunrise, but they would follow their list. Once it was completed, their day ended. Now, they didn't get a huge amount more free time, but they did get enough to spend with family, socialize, garden, and get rested. Every Sunday was a day off here, but they were expected every Sunday morning to attend the chapel with the family. Now, this would not have been an easy thing to do. Most of Western Africa is Muslim nation, and they don't speak English, so initially this would not have been a very comfortable way to spend their day off.
There's a blue heron we passed. Blue heron. Little ones? Oh.
So this little building is used by guests from the inn. They can wander around all of these trails and then stand up there to look at the view. But back when this was a working rice field, a very similar structure stood right there. So that would have been used by the overseer and the driver. Those were the two men in charge here. They kept everything running. From there, they could see the entire 100 acres and keep control of everything. After slavery was abolished, there was close to 4 million freemen across the United States. Now, a lot of the plantations offered freemen an income to stay working in them, and some people did remain. But the rice workers left. They had no desire to make any money, even if it was, no desire to grow rice, even if it was for money. So without that huge income from rice, it didn't take long before all the rice plantations were really in financial trouble. At Middleton, there were freemen that did stay here, but those that stayed had worked much closer to the family in the house and the gardens and the farm. Those that stayed, many stayed for their entire lives, and they were here all the way through until the 1950s. So by 1890, a lot had happened at Middleton Place and to the Middleton family. They had never found a really good way to make money. So they ended up losing all 18 of the plantations, only keeping the acreage here because of very wealthy relatives. But by 1890, they still decided that maintaining the gardens and the property was still too expensive. So they went and lived in their a smaller house that used to be at 1 Meeting Street in Charleston. So for 31 years, nobody touched the gardens. The next descendants to inherit Middleton were the Pringle Smith family. So they arrived here in 1921, and frankly, they loved to garden. So they set about restoring the gardens, but it took them 15 years to do this. After that, they opened up on special occasions as a tourist attraction. It wasn't until 1970 when tourism really took off here, and that's partly because Middleton was put onto the Historical Landmark Registry. This then really helped boost all of the advertising needed to get people to come here. Okay, so move to the right-hand side of the trail. So pull your horses over to the right. There's a water moccasin right there.
So girls, just pull your right rein and move over. There's a snake. It's one of the ones that we don't like.
Oh, I see him.
The one that was on the front porch?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really venomous, and they're the adults you don't need to worry about so much, because if they bite you, it's normally a dry bite. But the babies don't know any different, and if they bite you, you're going to hold the dog to the venom. Well, yes, thank you. I don't always see them, and I'll get somebody at the back saying, "Did you see the snake?" As long as they're on the side, we don't worry as much. When they're up the road. Alright, so once
You get to this spot right here, look through the trees to the top of the hill, and you can see a very large and unique house. So this is one of 14 private homes that are built here. In 1971, the present descendant started the Middleton Place Foundation. So he put this in place to keep all of this protected. So this will stay open for hopefully many generations to come and visit here. But in the 1980s, they wanted a bit of a better financial cushion. They started selling off parcels of land for private houses to be built, and there are now 14 private homes that sit up there. That one has the same architect as the Middleton Inn, so there's quite a few similarities between the two buildings.
Footing there, Nick. Looks familiar? Hmm? Looks familiar? Yeah, we just came through here. I think so. Yeah, that's what we started hearing. I'm a hunter. Huh? Yeah. We work together.
No, we switched them out. So we can't ride all of them in the front. They're not all brave enough. Like of these, the only one is Henry and Biggie that will go in the front. The others will just leave them out. Oh, I know. Yeah, they're like, no, I've got no confidence. Scary up front. Follow along for us. Yeah, they do. They're happy to follow. So what we'll do is if we have any that are being naughty, we will, if they're not a good front horse, they'll go as a back horse with a guide and we sort them back out. Because they do have some really good kids. You know, once in a while we've got to put them into time out. But for the most part, there's only a handful that I ride at the front. And I just rotate through them. Most of them, they do actually like it. They get to be in the front with their leader. They like it rather than being stuck in the back.
So don't forget to lean forwards as you come up. There's two little hills in here, but for the most part you can just stay sitting normally. So around the Charleston area we do have quite a few rivers. So these rivers used to be the main source of transport. They were by far the quickest and the easiest way to get from anywhere A to B. So from Middleton to Charleston by boat, they would use the outgoing tide so that they could keep moving. It would only take 2 to 3 hours, whereas a horse and buggy ride was a minimum of 8 hours. Very rough roads, not quite as bad as what we're on, but not far off. And so that was on a good day. If it was raining, it could easily take 16 plus hours to get from Middleton to Charleston. The Middletons being as wealthy as they were, they bought 2 boats and put in a huge boat dock at the bottom of the property. And they always preferred to go by boat, even if the weather was cold. Alright, so from the edge of the woods, you get a beautiful view of the equestrian centre and most of the 150 acres of paddocks that we have. The majority of the paddocks are empty because this is where the boarded horses will go at just before 3 o'clock today, so they'll stay out all night until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now the paddock that we're going to walk along is where we keep our trail for boys. We have 5 girls that we use on our team, and they are in another paddock that goes next to the main road.
So the trail horses, they live outside year round. Now most of these guys have lovely thick winter coats and they do a great job at keeping them warm. Some of them do have to have blankets at night, and they do have all of these live oaks. So the live oaks will keep their leaves for another couple months before they lose them, and they will provide a huge amount of protection for them.
And there's your friends over there, Nick. Ain't any of your buddies?
Yep, they have access to hay 24/7, and then they get a special meal, breakfast and dinner, and that's all manufactured grains, and like it's like a little pellet, and that's filled with all the things they need to stay healthy. Yeah, yep, just like dog food, yeah, everything in it. But the hay is in those 2 green pods, so that it keeps it dry. But also horses, if you feed them hay in the field, like that plant right there, they'll pee on it. They'll like mess it up and then they pee on it, and it's like, why? So they end up wasting it.
All right, so thank you for all coming today. I'm glad that it was such nice weather for you all. So what we'll do at the gate, I'm going to hop off, open the gate, everybody come in, stay at this end of the paddock. I'm going to put Biggie away. I'll then put you in your groups and get photos for you. After that, I'll help you get down, and then I'll tell you where to take your helmet and get a treat to feed your horse.
This was awesome. Middleton Place rocks. I loved it. Melanie loved it too. Brissa and Miko, I wish you guys were here as well. Oh, Nick. Signing off. It's Melanie's birthday. We love you.